Oh, see. Fallen it. Oft. She does it run well. Okay. I think. Yes. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Yeah. Hello there, everyone. My name is Kira Valkyrie, and I'm your host and your voice with voice. I accidentally turned out the stream while I kind of like fiddling with the dual streaming stuff again. Not the dual streaming stuff. You know what I'm talking about, like the dual the dual thingy. But yeah. Man, it's hard to draw arm. Do, do. Ooh. Yeah, bubbles popping. Getting happy about this. Ah! Ada. It's been a while. Doing like multiple different sides of the stream at the moment. Whew. Making since I'm like doing like vertical stream again, I'm trying to like on the art stream. Since like the reason I'm starting to do like vertical stream for drawing stream again is because like Twitch starting to use, you know, Twitch clip to do AI learning. I know YouTube does that shit again, but you know how much I hate like Twitch. They just gave me more reason not to like stream in Twitch, so I'm not going to stream any art stream in Twitch anymore. just for that, just from learning from that. So since I got like extra bandwidth to kind of like, you know, live streaming and stuff, so I'm like going back when I'm doing like live stream on the drawing side of things, I will be doing the vertical streams. But the vertical stream actually, in some sense, is really lack of lots of things on its own. So I'm trying to make like a something like similar to like the tripping animations I have like for the starting scene. But I want to recreate one more for, you know, like for my vertical side of things. Haven't really fully finished yet, but it's close. It's you need to figure out a lot of like, especially when it comes to animations, really like depends like how are you good. Especially like shoes is one of the hardest thing to animate because it's a very flexible thing. So it's not going to be like very like how you how a I can draw like a very basic shoe only because again I'm not like the greatest artist in the world. It's more like my specialty is either in like rough animations. I do like the general posing of the stuff, that really like rough posing of the things, or like doing storyboarding for like animations. When I study 3D animation, that is actually like more or less the focus skill that I have. So I'm not exactly excels at the post processing or like the middle of the process, which is like making like actual line art, coloring, doing the shadow, doing the FX, doing the um sound effect, like all those kind of things is not exactly my stuff. Mine is more like creating the concept, creating a storyboard, creating the movement, how it should go, like directors. Something similar onto the director side of the thing. I'd admit. So yeah, I'm not really exactly like on the finishing side of things, but when it comes to like directing side of things, I'm actually more like, I won't say professional, is like my skill more lean toward. So if you see a lot of rookie animations, even though I'm also a rookie animator, like my animation is weirdly also like my animation is like, you kind of slowly low key like notice this, is like my animation is like slowly like the flow itself is like very smooth. Usually when it comes to doing animations, a lot of people use the curve and stuff. I can skip that because even my lectures too, like when I study like 3D engineering, not 3D engineering, 3D animation stuff, the lecture do say I have an uncanny ability of doing rotoscope without rotoscope. That one take kind of like take a skills to actually do that. Because usually when do like what you call rotoscope is basically you layer a actual video recording behind the scene, and then you kind of like trace the movement. I can just eyeball the movement and then I can like do it very accurately. And I can, even without doing that, just based on my memory and imaginations, I can do that too. And I can even like turn the angle however I like. And I still can like somehow make an imagination properly on that. And then I can create like a stickman animations or this and that animations in a very dynamic way. So in some sense, my skill is lies within a very odd situations that I can't get. If I really want to get into like animation industry, I can't get a job. Because when it comes to directing movement, choreography, action scene, or like like doing storyboarding, all those kind of things, it kind of like within the VTubing in the not VTubing, like animation industry, it required people to are in like a more higher up kind of like, or senior level kind of stuff for them to actually like go into it. I know in Japan they actually work in the reverse way. They actually let the senior does the animations. Like all the story, not exactly storyboarding. At least give them a lot of chance to do lots of those kind of stuff. But on the like Western department, or like non like Japan style kind of animation department, they kind of don't do that, and also quite nepotistic when it comes to the much more higher rank of like C jobs, sadly. So yeah, again, like welcome to entertaining industry. Almost like 90% of the jobs, good one, is come in from nepotisms. Unless you open like a group yourself, is like I managed to find like a few like kindred spirit animators that also like do like almost I won't really say exact same thing, but they can like draw it or animate it in a way that match up with my vibe. And when I see it, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we can like do animation together and start an indie animations like company, like those kind of things. That would be fun. That would be fun. But too bad, like the era of making indie animations in YouTube is gone. Is gone. Unless you are like super fucking rich and then you have like a guy, or like you have a guy. Like last time, like we watched like how to make an indie animated indie game, right? So we need like that one guy that will go to multiple different places, get funding from that shit, and then promise them that they will get a return definitely somehow from posting video animation in YouTube. Which nowadays you don't exactly gain any like money from that anymore. So again, it's weird. It's going to be very, very difficult like road to climb if you really want to go for that route. Like not just normal difficult, it's like really, really difficult. Just for that, like animation by itself, like nature by itself, is just really difficult for things to like work properly. Yeah, especially like when AI actually can also start doing animation too. I'm fine with it, but I'm too broke to use like the speed dance to do my animations. And besides, like I say again, like my skill is within directing angle and dynamic movement. The AI animation things, they excel at that. So specifically nerf me. The AI, like the AI animation stuff is like specifically pointed a middle finger at me. At my particular like range of job. You know what? Since like you use the fire word a lot, maybe I can like make like the exclamation mark like far for you so you can use it time to time. Who knows, but too bad, like YouTube again, like the delay stuff, the file is going to get some delay. AI animations at the end, like for like the idea guy, for like one-man directors or one-man animators, I do say if you already like draw like the storyboard yourself, you let the AI read it, and then the AI can like make it based on your storyboard, then it's fine. In some sense. Like I say again, like I don't like funny thing, like as an artist, okay, I don't really go I don't really like say fuck you fuck AI a lot. It's more like fuck the misused user of AI a lot more, specifically on them. There are way too many people that don't use it as a tool, they use it as a, should I even say like abusive opportunity? Yeah, something like that. Especially like the way they gain the information to build up the AI in the first place is not even ethical in the first place. If they actually do it properly, okay, like how they like make the AI able to like learn like all this thing like properly in the proper channel and people using it nicely, maybe like you need actual like license to actually properly use this thing properly in the first place, yes, AI would not get this much hate as a tool. But the first step they did is to basically steal everyone's stuff, and then afterward they open it for public, so they make everyone also in the same culprit together. You know, it's like that's a reason. Okay, there's a reasons that why they decided to open AI for public. Okay, all the ChatGPT stuff, all the this and that AI stuff, because every single item they generate is more or less like, I would say like 90% is stolen item. Okay, and all the data and informations. So they generate all those like data informations like from stolen like IP, writings, reactions or art or anything like that. And then they open up for everyone to use, and then everyone use it. Means like everyone participate on the stealing. There is no stealing when there is a riot. This is how they do their business. If you guys never really like see it that way, now I open your eyes like on that particular part. This is how they do things. I do feel very sad about it though, because it is how it is, like how they did it. It's like nobody will complain about like art gets steal when everyone is getting it for free. This is why they did like open up freely for people on purpose to justify their stealing. So now everyone can use the free versions, and the extreme paid versions is very expensive. But here's the thing. Remember Claude? Yes, like the AI that help people write like programming coding. Yeah, people support, you know, them like taking as much information as possible. You'll be, it's fine, they take a few code, it's fine, they learn a little bit this and that like from like official stuff, but they didn't actually ask for it. At the end, everyone is using it to do good stuff, right? And then now the US government like locked down the better version of Claude, so you can't like write code using it anymore. So now the AI bro feels dumb. They offer and gave everything to Claude, and then now it's locked down. All the people from US can use it, except people from non-US. So like the non-US like AI bro feels like a dumbass right now. I do feel bad for them. Advocate for stealing, and then they didn't gain jack shit. There's still a lot of AI company exist, so... Oh, speaking about AI stuff, I should actually roll back a little bit. I don't... TV. I should play this thing for you guys. I won't be very hopeful for it, but it is a video about the AI bubble is kind of like, you know, like something called domino effect. If you guys don't know what domino is, it's not the pizza, it's not the game itself. It's like, you know, like you stack a lot of like, you know, like plank in a line, and then you topple one, and then it just keep on doing continuous topple on many other stuff. This is why we call AI bubble. One pop, and the rest goes follow. So, this particular video that I'm going to show you guys, okay, this video I'm going to show you guys is not exactly sure, because like you can't just like learn from one source. You need to learn from like lots of things. I'm not exactly like super invested in this kind of thing, so you're just going to take her word with a grain of salt. Where do RAM come from? Where do memory chip come from? To be precise, SK Hynix and Samsung. Obviously, there's like some other places too. Obviously, but generally, it's either from Taiwan or from Korea. Newsflash: Korea's side of all the memory market and all the things that related to AI right now, the stock market has been crashing. And because of that crashing, it's starting to affect US at the moment. But how much, I have no idea. Anyone invested stock in AI, I do feel bad for you. I talked to a lot of people a long time ago when they do like, you know, stock investment. I would say like never touch the fucking AI. because they are more volatile than fucking NFT. Well, they pop now. Well, at least like if they manage to ride the wave up and then they like left early, then yeah, like good luck for good for them. But if they're still riding the wave, now it crashing now. Oh, now it's just crash and burn. I just crash and burn. Crash so hard.
Text message that wipes out your whole net worth. You check your trading app, you pray for a glitch, but it's not a glitch. Your life savings are actually gone. The truth is actually worse than zero because now you owe the bank a fortune. That exact nightmare just hit 300,000 young Korean investors. They didn't just lose cash on a single bad trade, but an automated system basically forcibly liquidated all of their accounts.
Yeah, pardon the expression, right? There's a bit of soul searching out in Korea.
This machine ran on AI hype plus heavy debt. The South Korean stock market completely breaking led to $250 billion wiped out in days.
On Monday, the Kospi plunged to close at the 6,500 level. The main Kospi opened lower and plunged more than 4%, closing at 6,516.27.
After that, that triggered 7 consecutive market circuit breakers. This was not a normal crash. The culprit were leveraged funds, and a lot of desperate young people.
Again, I'm not like really into like stock market and stuff or finance things. If you are personally understand finance stuff a lot, then yeah, like it sounds bad. I do understand some of it because I used to study on business side of things, and then I jumped to like engineering and then jump to animations. So it's more like I understand it only on layman terms. It's just going to say one thing trigger another. Is kind of similar to how like back in the days like the Great Depressions happens. Is because like one guy decided to see like a dip, and then he hold lots of stock. He decided to sell, and everyone also like doing sell, and then every like it basically is a big domino effect happen. This one seems to not be like a very big thing, but it seems like more like multiple small people is like doing lots of stuff. And because it's support, like all those people are actually supported by the government, because the government let them like borrow a shit tons of money to do this like an investment. So now everyone crashed, and the government itself is trying to bail everyone out, which kind of like crashed the government itself.
Providing the fuel.
Financial.
And now what's going on with the Korean stock market is now sending shockwaves through the US. So South Korea is a global manufacturing powerhouse, but in early 2026, the stock market changed because the entire financial system then became concentrated and focused and obsessed with artificial intelligence. We all know that these new AI models require a lot of computing power, and that power relies heavily on memory, specifically HBM or high bandwidth memory chips. So there's a company in Korea called SK Hynix that controls roughly half of this global market. They hold a near monopoly alongside Samsung Electronics. So trillions of Korean won flooded directly into these two companies, and by June of 2026, these two companies made up half of the Korean stock exchange, the KOPC index specifically. Think about the American stock exchange for a second. Imagine if 2 tech giants controlled half of the S&P. That intense concentration basically made the South Korean stock market a very high-risk, high-reward bet, because basically there was no more diversification. A standard index fund on the Korean stock exchange basically became a huge bet on AI. And so this massive wealth shift attracted a very specific group. Young South Koreans in their 20s and 30s rushed in. They already have a tough domestic job market out there. It is also hard there for local people to afford housing prices. So the stock market looked like their only escape path or their path out. During the 2020 pandemic, some of these young Korean traders actually came together and bought the dip when foreign investors sold, and many of them made a lot of money from that.
Because I work in the tech industry and I worked in AI company since 2017, so I believe in that future. I'm sitting on the position of 1300% of gain.
And so like many, they saw this new semiconductor rush as a new path out. But then the government gave them a weapon that they didn't fully understand. So in May of 2026, the South Korean government made a choice. Officials saw domestic money flowing into American tech stocks, and they desperately wanted to keep that cash domestically. So regulators approved a new volatile financial product, the single stock leveraged fund. These tie directly to local champions like Samsung, and they promise to double the daily profits. Young traders love stuff like this, a booming stock market, being able to buy on leverage. That is their path out. It is their lottery ticket. So this created a massive culture of borrowing to invest. Then there were a bunch of college students and young professionals maxing out their credit, and as a result, retail margin debt hit all-time records. Loan balances had hit $30 trillion of won. These investors rarely were using cash that they already had on hand. Now, on the South Korean stock market, it takes 2 days to officially settle a trade. Traders use this gap to buy funds with phantom money. They would go sell one stock and immediately buy a leverage. And this retail market, aka a group of regular people, were exposed. Meanwhile, their government was celebrating as the market hit record highs because they saw this debt fueled rally as a huge international geopolitical win. But this mechanism also requires continuous foreign investment to survive.
College student Kim Jae-min said the market swings were difficult for him psychologically.
I ended up selling at an absolutely ridiculous low price. After that, I kept thinking to myself, why did I do that? It was so painful. I couldn't sleep at night. And at 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and wrote a post on my blog asking myself why I had acted that way.
So while local traders in Korea took on debt to invest in Samsung and SK Hynix, foreign institutions started exiting. One catalyst here was the SpaceX IPO. Basically, a lot of foreign institutions had to pull money out of Korea to invest in SpaceX. SpaceX raised $75 billion at a very big valuation, and a lot of global asset managers basically needed quick cash to be able to buy in. There were a lot of people getting in at the last minute, which I'm sure you guys saw some news articles about.
SpaceX gears up to finalize its IPO pricing today. This as it attracts more than $70 billion in orders from retail investors alone.
So to get money to invest in SpaceX, they had to sell off their tech stocks in Korea. That was one catalyst that started the downward cascade, but then things got a lot worse a month later because on July 10th, SK Hynix decided to list on the NASDAQ.
SK Hynix's US listing is way oversubscribed, priming the Korean memory maker for the biggest ever foreign first-time share sale in America.
They raised over $26 billion in America, which was considered a huge victory for SK Hynix.
There's clearly demand, heading towards $200 billion of demand for a $26.5 billion deal. When we talk about it being oversubscribed, that's how I'd frame it in the dollar terms.
This move gave them direct access to American capital markets, but it was a huge disaster for the Korean stock market, because foreign investors no longer needed to trade through Seoul.
I think what you're seeing in Korea in particular is that there's still that kind of dip buying within retail. Yes, you may have had some profit taking post Samsung results, etc. That means that you have downside. But until I think you see persistent weakness over multiple days, multiple weeks, I wouldn't really call it a bear market.
Imagine being a US investor. There's a bit of a roadblock whenever you buy international securities because you have to exchange your local currency to the currency of the country that you're trying to buy in. And so with this listing on the NASDAQ, basically Americans could easily buy the stock in US dollars. So capital basically shifted away from the KOPSI index back to the NASDAQ. A major index provider even denied South Korea an upgrade. And what happened after that was that trillions of dollars from passive global funds turned away.
Yesterday, Hong Kong surged by more than 3%. Korea suffered its biggest sell-off in months. Is this simply money rotating out of an overcrowded Korea tech trade, or are investors, in your opinion, fundamentally re-rating China now?
So foreign institutions started pulling money out of Korea. But remember, some of these young Korean investors have put in all of their life savings and more, even borrowing money to invest in the Korean market. A normal index fund usually buys and holds a basket of stocks, but a leveraged single stock fund works a little bit differently. It doesn't borrow money to buy more shares, but they make massive bets with global banks. So banks agree to pay the fund double the daily profit, and to cover that bet, banks trade the actual stock. This creates a huge problem when the market goes down because the funds have a strict rule that they have to follow. They must, at the end of every day, be balanced for tomorrow. If the underlying stock drops 5 basis points in one day, then the leveraged fund instantly loses 10 basis points of its values.
There are these levered ETFs that have become so much more popular, and that means that on the upside you get more juice, but on the downside you get squeezed more too.
So the fund shrinks to keep everything balanced, and they are mechanically forced to sell shares before closing.
And even we talk about like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, people worried about mutual funds, worried about the rebalance of ETF. But right now, ETF rebalance is like a BAU, and it didn't, distorting the market mechanism.
By early July, there was a SK Hynix fund that had $13 billion, and this single product grew so massive that it consumed most of the company.
This ETF called CISO SK Hynix leverage product was listed in Hong Kong in October, and in just a couple of months' time, it has grown so large and so fast. So it now has asset under management of $13 billion.
Well, here's the thing about like stock stuff, okay? The government is the one that support the stocks. So everyone thought, like, try to think this, like, everyone have their own like retirement funding stuff like that, EPF, like something 2K something, insurance, yada yada stuff. A lot of people have their own kind of like, like funding, kind of like prevent inflation, like devalue like their saving money. That's how people play stocks. But here's a problem, like at the end it's still a very unstable stuff. Either you put it for government use, or like put it in the bank, or put it in stocks. You only got this 3 ways. And essentially, since the government support this particular stock so much, people would view this as another way, like put money, let government handle it for you. Since like they let banks do the trading for you. So it's more like you gave money to the government and then the government do stock market for you. And it royally fucked up.
And that is largest of its kind globally.
The Daily Balancing Act made up most of the trading, and SK Hynix no longer traded based on the actual business health of the company. Traders didn't care so much about AI demand anymore. The stock started to dip naturally, the fund dumped millions of shares. This forced selling was starting to drive the price down every single day and about to trigger a really bad nightmare.
The Korean Kospi shed 10% on Tuesday. It did recover a little bit today, but memory chip giants SK Hynix and Samsung make up about 50% of that Kospi index. The slide coming as regulators warned that the popularity of levered ETFs could lead to increased volatility. There were some rumors about measures they might take to clamp down on speculation. The Kospi is still over 100% higher for the year, but all of this could be potentially a warning sign.
On the morning of July 13th, the Korean stock market officially broke and they experienced a Black Monday. So there was a huge wave of forced bank sell-offs. Prices dropped yesterday, banks demanded their borrowed money back. Young investors had no money to give back. Some of their accounts were seized. Investors dumped millions of shares for whatever price they could get. And this morning fire sale basically started this downward death spiral of the price.
As futures and spot prices plummeted, the Korea Exchange stepped in to stabilize the market. At 10:52 a.m., a sell-side sidecar was triggered on the Kosdaq as the futures index dropped by more than 6%, suspending program trading for 5 minutes. This marks the 10th sell-side sidecar triggered on the Kosdaq this year. Shortly after, at 11:21 a.m., the Kospi saw its 20th sell-side sidecar of the year as the Kospi 200 futures fell more than 5%.
The leveraged funds were also forced to sell off more shares, then that triggered more sell-offs the next day. The market crashed so fast it tripped 7 emergency breakers and the entire stock market was halted for 20 minutes.
On Monday, the Kospi plunged to close at the 6,500 level. The main Kospi opened lower and plunged more than 4%, closing at 6,516.27.
There were some investors, unfortunately, that didn't just cut their losses and run away. Some of them even threw more money at the crash, thinking that they were buying the stocks at a discount. But by the end of the week, over 300,000 retail accounts were entirely wiped out. People lost their savings. They were left holding all this additional debt. The government and politicians had to step in. the South Korean AI bubble had popped, and this was not good. The Kospi dropped almost 9%, SK Hynix and Samsung dropped 15% and 10% respectively, and the shockwaves were going to America. Now, all of this stuff was happening simultaneously as Kevin Warsh made his debut as Federal Reserve Chair in July. He's known for a strict monetary policy. He also said that interest rates are going to stay high.
Price stability and maximum employment. And these objectives guided our business in the meeting just concluded. As you saw a few moments ago, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the Fed funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75%.
Markets hate high interest rates, and even more the reason for US investors to pull money out of the Korean stock market. On that day, Micron went up 7% and billions of dollars were rotated back into the US stock market. As the local Korean stock market was burning, the Korean government hit the panic button. On July 16th, regulators paused all new leveraged funds because the exchange had triggered 7 separate circuit breakers across the month, which led to a bunch of emergency halts, basically to stop the bleeding. But halting the stock market didn't save any young investors at all. So South Korea's Financial Services Commission had to fast track a few new rules. First, they're now tripling the minimum cash deposit required for investors to trade, and now they require 30 million won, which is roughly 20,000 US dollars, just to participate in trading. They also got rid of substitute collateral because usually traders are allowed to post existing stocks or bonds as collateral, and regulators are now wanting cash for settlement. Now, this emergency policy is being criticized because the South Korean government spent months letting investors know that it was okay to buy these products. Over 1.2 million retail investors had to face margin calls, forced liquidations, and pretty much lost all of their money. These losses were even more amplified if any of these traders had bought into the single stock leveraged ETF. That SK Hynix single stock leveraged ETF, which is designed to deliver 2 times the daily move in SK Hynix, has fallen from 70% of its record high and is down 50% since its original debut. And according to stats from the South Korean media, over 60% of these liquidated investors are people that are under the age of 30. So what does this crash mean for America? South Korea was the canary in the coal mine.
If Hynix is increasing capacity in commodity and taking capacity away from these super high margin, super high priced AI chips, the big question investors are saying is, why is that? Is there signs that the AI trade or the momentum side of things or the cost dynamics aren't quite as rosy as they were first predicted?
The US market faces the exact same concentration risk, a tiny group of tech giants carrying the entire US economy. And with higher interest rates, cheap debt is gone.
If you look at the Mag 7 stocks, they become a funding trade for the semis and the AI on the other side of the AI trade. So it's kind of like, it's like the AI buyers, who are these hyperscalers, versus the AI sellers, who are the chip companies selling to them. There is something going on within this dynamic, so it's something to watch for.
US tech companies have to prove real AI profits fast. And South Korea proved that when hype meets debt, collapse happens fast.
Yep. But again, like, there's so many multi-billionaire that exist, they can just toss their fucking money in to patch back the bubble. This is a little bit countrywide level, so they need a few more millionaires together to kind of like shove the money into the furnace. But I won't really say from economist standpoint. It's more like from the people behind the scenes that want to keep the fucking AI bubble like keep going. I think they will actually toss a shit tons of money into it. Like the billions, like technically are kind of like behind the scenes that control most of like the AI bubble stuff. So if they see dangers, they already been pushing so deep into the trenches, like making like AI a thing, the entire market into a thing. It's like suddenly you see like, oh, why there's like a Hollywood star that I never heard before like become super famous. Yeah, industry plan. Like AI itself is a industry plan. So same with like a few stuff. So they have been pushing it so deep into the trenches at the moment. So I believe they do not have the ability to dig themselves back out. The only way is to dig deeper. Hope they find gold. So they can recover from that. Like, I won't really say relatively easy is going to have like deep pocket, but we already know, like, just Jeff Bezos alone, she can like Jeff Bezos can like literally cover the entire like lost cost of the GDP of the fucking Korea itself, and he still have money to buy a few yacht and throw like super party. So yeah. So many people talking about the AI crash, huh? Maybe you should watch this one. The Monopoly of Grabs. Grab is like Uber in like Malaysia's or like in the Asia side of things. But they kind of do a lot of stuff like, aside from that. It's like they also like give you like debit systems, credit cards, using a debit card to make like a debit to create like a debit card systems. No, using a debit card to create like a credit card systems on their own. And also like they are, aside from food delivery, they do grocery delivery, and also like third party delivery service from like all the other like fast food chain, and also obviously do the Uber stuff, like drive people here and there. And they also do a lot of like payment process stuff in Malaysia alone. So like a lot of stuff can go through like Grabs, the apps. Practically, it's some things that Elon Musk wants, but he never bothered to do it. He keeps saying that he want like, like Twitter to become like this like universal app that can do everything, just like how does like Grab stuff do. But he never really like proceed into it. He basically just bought like Twitter's and just left it there, not do anything about it. But yeah, so essentially Grab is like the special special entity in Malaysia's. It's kind of like monopolized the entire thing because in Malaysia's we don't have Uber, we don't have any other stuff. Okay, when it comes to like calling a cab, maybe you still can call a taxi, but nowadays it's kind of like taxi has been like fully integrated to Grab too. So like you can literally use like Grab the apps to call taxi. So essentially every single thing possible you can think about delivery service is kind of like got like instant like food delivery, like driving stuff, or like shopping, eating other things. Everything is kind of like got like Grab's got their hands on. some people might think it's bad, but obviously monopoly is bad because they literally can have like a no contest on like rating and stuff, so they can just treat their worker badly, this and that, yet stuff, or like charge like users like me to order food because I can't go out that much because of my issues. So like usually food that maybe like charge like 10 like $5 like burgers. If I order in Grabs, I include like all the delivery fee, this and that, yada yada stuff. It also like the increased like tax service from like the like imagine like the burger store itself, so they have to like mark up the price just to cover the cost using Grab. Um, and also we have to like cover the cost for the for delivery fee. So a $5 burgers would basically jump to like 10 to $15 burgers. It was not that expensive, but because all those things, it become like super expensive because of that. That's those kind of things, and then we can't complain about it because there's no other like delivery service like do a better job than them. Like those kind of things. Like this is why monopoly is not that good. So yeah. But also at the end, okay? At the end, I do appreciate Grab being a thing. The delivery service, the driver service, the help you buy grocery and then deliver to you to your house kind of service, and like a lot of other things. Like here's the thing, Malaysia, I would say, especially in the city area. I'm a city boy, so and like I'm a city man now. That I'm 31 years old, no more city boy. Um, so yeah, we have issues of what we call purse snatchers. But it's not the classic purse snatchers. It's like you just go around and then there's someone grab your purse and then ran away. No, they literally ride in motorcycles. It's basically just like a bike gang. Just go around, zooming around, grab people's purse. If you would not let go the purse, and the motorcycle guy that grabbed your purse will just drag you across the street until you died. There's so many death cases that involve that kind of like crime. It's because people can't get a job, they are being gangster about stuff, things, bike gang. So like like those kind of like things like happen here and there. So a lot of those kind of motorcycle purse snatchers, like for them is like the next best job they can have. I know it's fucking crime itself, but for them is the next best thing they can do. Okay. So when Grab become a thing, like using motorcycle to do a lot of delivery service, this and that stuff, everyone start to have a job, and the crime rate of like a purse snatcher itself almost disappeared. I never heard about a single one about like purse snatching cases for a very, very long time. For like literally from like COVID time, like lockdown time to now, I'm not hearing a single like death crime from like people like like get that purse snatch and then like drag across the street. And so maybe it's too gruesome, they don't like talk about it anymore. I don't know, but so far I never personally hear any news about it. But I do hear a lot of like news about like unhinged teenagers stab the shit out of old people because the old people nag them. Like I'm not even kidding, it's a thing. And people like start to like stop like being like very publicly um back in my days, like they stopped doing that in public anymore because like teenagers in Malaysia seems to be very unhinged lately. Fucking the Gen Z, yeah, they have a lot of knife on them. I know it's a little bit extreme the way I talk about it. It is what it is. But itself, I would say like the adult side of the crime, okay, not the teenager side of the crime. The adult side of the crime has been lowered down a lot more than you think, just because Grab exists, because everyone can earn their own monies. They now live a stable life. Actually, I even hear like so less about like gang violence and this and that other stuff anymore in my city area. So I will always say like it's a very good thing. Very good thing. Not that much of it. I think it's still there, just not like a huge amount enough that even a guy like me don't watch like news a lot will learn about it. Now, generally, almost like all the news I heard about like stuff like happening in Malaysia, like include crimes and death, those kind of stuff, is just freak accidents. Not really like intentional crime. Hey, good for you. Keep shopping. Just don't waste all your money, okay? But yeah, like that's that. Keep on opening some of things. Wow, it seems like the AI bubble thing. The AI bubble pop thing is like really, really strong at the moment. Wow. I know today's economy, like being a game dev is really bad. But I do want to like watch extra credit for no reasons, because back in the days I decided to study 3D animations is because I watched lots of extra credit. I also want to become a game dev, but I don't know how to be one, so I studied like 3D animations to kind of like get my chance to get into like game developments. But ooh, later on I found out like a lot of yeah, medical wise. Yeah, I feel like there's lots of like older extra credit stuff. It's not there anymore. I think this current extra credit we see is like the new extra credit. I think they rebrand like the old extra credit to extra history. So yes, so if you want to see like a lot of like extra credit stuff, you actually have to go to the history channel to kind of find like the older extra credit. Hmm. Should we go and take a look the game industry or the game design? Yeah, let's look at the yeah. Yeah, game career.
It's been a while since we've done one of these. We've covered a handful of positions on this series, designers, producers, developers, but there are still plenty of other roles that we haven't touched on yet, and this happens to be one that I've got 6 years of experience working with. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to be a professional animator. Also, our guest artist today is animator Michael Ozzie, so say hello. So what does an animator do? We are essentially puppeteers. We take inanimate objects, be they clay figures, digital character models, or drawings on paper, and we create the illusion of life and motion. We're also actors in a way. You may never see us performing on camera, but every animated character you see is an extension of the animators, voice actors, and motion capture performers behind them. We are all about crafting movement and performance, transforming that inanimate object you're looking at on screen into a living, thinking character you adore. Okay, so how does one become an animator? Where do you start? My first piece of advice to you is to acquire a specific book. Go pick up The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. Just about every animator I've ever met knows this book, and probably owns it. It's one of the best books available on the fundamentals of animation. It mostly describes things in terms of traditional
mine's from
hand-drawn
Alan
techniques,
Baker.
but the principles it covers apply to every form. Speaking of which, you should decide what kind of animation you want to do. What style interests you? Computer animation? Traditional? Stop motion? Pixel animation? What medium do you want to work in? Film? Games? Visual effects? Do some research. Learn how these different formats of animation work. The same fundamental principles apply to all of them, but each medium has its own specific workflows and challenges. Knowing what kind of animation you want to do is going to help you equip yourself with the necessary skill set. Now, you don't have to go to school for animation to become a great animator, but there are a lot of good schools out there. The top North American 4-year colleges I usually hear about are CalArts in California, Ringling in Florida, SCAD in Georgia, and Sheridan up in Ontario. All of them are great schools, but they can be pretty expensive. If that's not the route you want to take, but animation is something you know you want to do, and especially if you want to be a 3D animator, then I highly recommend Animation Mentor. It's an online-only trade school that you can enroll in from anywhere. Their course is excellent, it's taught by exceptional animators who are all currently working in the industry, it's less expensive than most 4-year programs, and their graduate employment rate is pretty darn impressive. And there are other online courses like it, and I recommend looking into those too, but Animation Mentor is the one that I can personally vouch for.
Yeah, like most of the things, this is like 10-year-old news, so not really sure like how super reliable all this thing is. So just remember, listen all this with a grain of salt. Like things change a lot with this 10 years in the industry.
Or from experience. But ultimately, when it comes to choosing a school, I always recommend looking at the animation work of its students, because the quality of the average student's reel will say a lot about the quality of the program. Better still, find out each school's graduate job placement rate. That'll give you a good idea of how ready a school's graduates are for working professionally. Which is important because animation's a pretty competitive field. There are a lot of people out there trying to do this for a living, and you'll often be competing with people who have way more experience than you do. So the quality and the creativity of your work needs to stand out if you want to get those job offers. As with most artist professions, the strength of your portfolio is what's going to get you hired. Look up the reels of accomplished animators working in your desired field. It'll not only give you an idea of what a good demo reel should contain, but also show you a quality target to aim for. They may seem out of your league right now, but that's okay. Setting a high bar for yourself will serve you well. Alright, so that was a lot of talk about schools and jobs and such, but let's get back to the craft itself. What makes a good animator? How do you get better? A good animator is always studying movement. We're analytical, always on the lookout for interesting walks and interesting facial expressions, and always trying to figure out how we can replicate them, exaggerate them. So observe people, learn to analyze the intricacies of their body language. Watch video footage of an interesting movement frame by frame to study the body mechanics involved in producing that movement. In fact, recording yourself performing the action can be really helpful too, as acting it out yourself will help you to better understand the physicality of that movement. A good animator also studies acting. I mean, how are you going to make a character give an interesting acting performance if you don't know anything about acting yourself? Now, you don't have to be a good actor, but it's important to understand the fundamentals. If you have a chance, take an acting class, and make a habit of studying actor performances in film so that you can learn from the best. Watch movies and plays, build an ever-expanding library in your head of interesting performances, noting how they made you feel and why. A good animator also studies other people's animation, but it's very important to remember that studying real life should always take priority. Ultimately, reality is the source that all animators draw from. We exaggerate it and we stylize it. An animation is one animator's interpretation of reality. So if you're only analyzing other animators' interpretations and not the source that inspired them, the only thing you'll know how to replicate is someone else's interpretation, and your work is going to become derivative. That said, it can be very useful to learn interpretation tricks from the greats who came before you, to dissect how they stylized reality so that you can find ways to better do so yourself. A good animator is aware of what their animation needs to achieve in the greater context of the project, and how to adapt their work accordingly. A good film animator understands the purpose of the shot they're working on as it relates to the film. A good game animator knows when it's more important for a character movement to look good, or when it's more important that it feel good during play. A good animator avoids cliches. They always look for the most interesting choice, rather than the most obvious, predictable one. A good animator doesn't necessarily have to be able to draw. I mean, unless you want to be a traditional 2D animator, in which case, yeah, you kinda need to be able to draw. Still, even for a computer animator, drawing can be a useful complementary skill to develop. A good animator is also a team player. Animation is usually a collaborative craft. If you're working in games or movies, you're likely to be part of a large team, and it's important that you be someone people enjoy working with. Someone who can cooperate, take direction, offer supportive criticism, and just play nice in general. If people like working with you, finding work will be a lot easier. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, a good animator always pushes themselves to keep getting better. You will never hit a point where there's no growing left to do. Even the best animators in the world are still learning and improving their craft every year with every project. In fact, that's why they're the best. As one of my favorite people I've ever worked with told me, you will never reach the top climbing this mountain, because there is no top. You'll see a ledge above you that looks like the top from where you are, but once you finally get yourself up there, that's when you'll see the next cliff face waiting ahead. So just take a moment to celebrate how far you've come, and then start climbing again. I hope that's cleared up what an animator does and given you a place to get started. If you're interested in hearing me talk more about animation, I've been making a semi-regular series over on Extra Play analyzing the animation from numerous games, giving small animation 101 lessons, occasionally answering some of your animation questions. In fact, I'm releasing a new set of episodes on Monster Hunter's creature animation just this week, so I'll put a link at the end. Thank you for watching, thank you again to Michael Ozzie for the guest art this week, and to my fellow animators, happy climbing.
Every week, we are asked the question, what skills do I need to be a game designer? This is an incredibly complicated question, one that James has had to wrestle with both vocationally and this word. But this week, we're going to try and give you the best answer we've been able to come up with. So, what should you learn if you want to be a game designer? You ready? Everything. Seriously, game design is the art of crafting experiences, and you'll find yourself drawing on everything you have. To a great game designer, there is no useless knowledge. But not all of us have the time to learn everything that ever was or will be before starting to design experiences, so what should you focus on? Well, first, you can start with a game designer's single most core skill, communication. As you start to build games, most of you will find that you have to work with interdisciplinary teams formed of people with radically different skill sets and backgrounds from you. If you work on video games, you'll have to work with artists, programmers, designers, producers, sound guys, marketers, and business people. If you can't communicate the experience you're trying to design to each of these groups, the quality of your ideas will not matter, because these are the people that translate those ideas into an experience that reaches the world. The tricky part here is how different all these people are. I know it's a horrible generalization, but I'm going to say it anyway. Artists and programmers have a totally opposite, diametrically opposed way of approaching problems, and it's your job to make both of those people share the same vision. Which brings us to our next point, and this is extremely important. The game designer is not the same as a director. Your job is not to be a dictator, demanding people to implement your brilliant ideas. Everyone who touches a game influences its design, even if you don't intend for them to. When your programmer writes a physics system, the choices he makes are going to impact the design of the game. Anyone out there who thinks that the designer is the guy who gets to decide what the game is has some serious disillusionment ahead of them before they can excel at this job. Speaking of common misconceptions, here's another important tip. Game design is not the job of creating fabulous stories or coming up with concepts for games. Concepts are cheap. Every one of you budding designers probably have 5 or 6 you could pull out right now. Even if you don't want to get into game design, you've probably come up with 1 or 2 game ideas over the years. Hell, I'd be a terrible game designer, but even I can come up with 2 or 3. Not only are game concepts cheap, but they're also pretty meaningless. At the end of the day, the best-selling franchise of all time is about an Italian stereotype and hallucinogens. One of the most lauded concepts of the last few years was first-person shooter, Ayn Rand, underwater. Go. Real game design is a lot of hard, rote work, creating systems, mechanics, and levels. Concepts are great, but if that's what you want to do, you probably better find another field. There just isn't any room in the game studio for a specialized idea guy. Every game studio is full of idea guys. I mean, everyone who works there has ideas. Good ones. What studios are looking for are people who can make those concepts a reality. Another important thing that every game designer has to learn eventually is that you are the worst judge of your own games. Especially early on, when you can justify away the flaws, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying that people just don't get it because they haven't seen the finished product. This is almost never true. Introspection and the ability to take criticism are core designer skills. Don't let yourself get too attached to your ideas, because you'll always be wrong. No great game has ever sprung fully formed from a game designer's head. Games need players. Players themselves design half the experiences they play. Being able to accept that your idea didn't work, to be willing to give up on that idea you loved so much because it just isn't working, and try something else, these are the hallmarks of a great game designer. Next, game design is a discipline. Just because you've played a lot of games or a whole lot of a specific game does not mean you're prepared to design games. Most of the time, designers don't play games, they study them and analyze them. They deconstruct their systems and test all their breakpoints. A designer will figure out where all the triggers are located, and then try and figure out why. They'll reverse engineer the math behind the principal systems. Designers are as fascinated by what makes an experience unfun as by what makes it fun. Additionally, a game designer must understand the cost of the decisions they make. Whenever you make a decision as a designer, what you're really doing is asking people to do work. That work represents time and money, and you have a finite amount of work that will ever be done on your project. Your job as a designer is to ensure the most bang for your buck. I know this may not seem like that big a deal, but trust me, this is the #1 cause of failed games. From the giants of the AAA industry to the small fry hobbyist modders, more game projects fail because of teams with a poor sense of scope than any other reason. As a corollary to that point, understand that no game is ever done. Ever. During the process of putting your game together, I guarantee you'll find things you should have done differently, and discover countless other amazing things you could do. File those ideas away, or at least realize how incredibly expensive it usually is to expand the scope of your game midstream. Remember, at some point, you must ship. You can't work on your game forever, and you haven't made a game unless people are playing it. On top of all that stuff, here's a list of the many practical skills you'll need if you want to be a game designer. 1, a high level of technical writing skill. That's technical, not creative writing skill. I'm talking about grammar, spelling, and punctuation here. I'm sure this isn't a problem for most of you, but for some of you, well, like I said, we do read the emails. 2, a solid grounding in logic. 3, some basic psychology. 4, understanding the medium you're working in. You're going to be building electronic games, so learning the fundamentals of how a computer works would be a good idea. 5, a solid grasp of mathematics, at least through advanced algebra. Those skills will prepare you to be a decent game designer. Now, if you want to be a really good game designer, you'll also need 1, a thorough knowledge of literature, philosophy, and myth. 2, an understanding of world religions. 3, basic scripting and programming ability. 4, an understanding of art principles. You don't have to be a great artist, but you do need to understand art. If you happen to be able to sketch or throw together a collage in Photoshop, so much the better. 5, an understanding of basic audio design and musical principles. If you haven't already, go pick up an instrument. It's good for the soul anyway. 6, a practical knowledge of graphic design. 7, a thorough internal library of games to reference. This is where having played a lot of games will help you. The more games and genres you've experienced, the more you'll have to draw from. But most of all, you'll need life experience. As a designer, you are crafting experiences. You cannot do this without having some yourself. Knowing all about video games, anime, or the Star Wars expanded universe isn't going to cut it. Go live. A well-balanced, well-examined life will make you a great designer. Last and most obvious of all, make games. If you aren't sure where to begin, you can always start with pen and paper games, things you can put together out of chit and poster board. Or if you're dead set on jumping right into electronic games, we recommend Game Maker for the PC owners, or Game Salad if you've got a Mac. Both of these programs are free, have a low barrier to entry, and will teach you the logic of a computer without expecting you to already have a lot of programming knowledge. Be brave, be bold, create. Bring us new experiences and help to expand the language of games. Good luck, and see you next week.
Over the past few years, we've done a series of So You Want to Be episodes talking about what it takes to fill the various roles in the game industry. But lately we've got more and more requests for suggestions on how to get into independent games development, and since it's something that James has worked with a number of people on, we figured, hey, why not? Hopefully this helps some of you take the first steps toward getting more fantastic games out to the world. So, without further ado, Lesson 1. The first thing you have to know as an indie dev is that you are not going to be making a game with the scope of a God of War or a Call of Duty. For your first project, think simple, think small. Whether you're self-financing for a few $1,000,000 or you're living off a ramen, it doesn't matter. You want to keep your first project achievable, something you can get out to market and into the hands of real people. Your first time through this process will teach you a great deal, even if you're already a wizened veteran coming out of the AAA industry. It's a totally different experience working with a small team and actually getting to help call all the shots. And if you're not a veteran, the amount you're going to learn from this is just staggering. I can guarantee you this. Your second project will be so much better and go so much smoother than your first. And when it comes time to start your second project, think simple, think small again. James has an enormous amount of experience estimating project timelines, and to this day, when he makes these estimates, he always just adds an extra 50% to the schedule and budget, because these projects always end up with 1,000 little pieces and complexities you can't possibly foresee before you've gotten started. Lesson 2.
Yeah, this is why I say, like, when I play Wuthering Wave, I did talk about, like, I do love, like, how janky the mini game is, because you can see the jankiness is because it is most likely case made by a small team of new recruit. It's like, oh, now we hired like maybe like 5 new recruit here. Okay, you guys form a team, and then I add 2 more seniors into it. You guys like make a mini game out of it for the next season update. I do love that. I do love that. And then they'd be like, okay, since it's like a gacha game, so it's kind of like a little bit live service-ish. So you have to create a mini game for this. Do however you want, just long as it kind of keep consistent with the stories. Make a mini game for fun, and within 5-6, within like 4, I remember it's like 4-month period, 4-5-month periods, and then they start making it. It's a fun like exercise. If like this is like, I would say like it is a proper way for a lot of people who like, I don't see a lot of Western company does it. Only on like Asia Eastern company like do this kind of stuff. It's more like, like they give people opportunity to make a lot of like smaller type of game. Like on the bigger side, like try to think Fortnite. They don't really do mini game. They provide you to tool for the players to make mini game. Okay, they themselves only focus on the, okay, next season we need to have this collab, we do this design, we have this game mechanic for this particular season. The next season, what we are going to do. They never really like properly like focusing like, okay, separate mini game for using the Fortnite systems. They never do that themselves. Sometimes they do, but it's more like an individual thing rather than like individual choice, rather than like it's a company mandate stuff. And for a lot of different kind of like Western kind of like live service, I rarely see them do that kind of practice. Sometimes they do, but it's not a very often thing to happen. It's kind of like rarely happen in like a few seasons. Like Destiny is one of them. I'm kidding. Like Destiny become like so next campaign focused to a point that there's almost like no like proper mini game. There is proper mini game, but it's kind of like build it along together for like the entire campaign itself. Not like a very separate like branch of thing to do. In some sense, people can argue kind of is, but also in reality, like the way they process the thing is like is a totally different.
Being an indie dev involves a lot more than just building games. I've known plenty of teams that were great at building games, but whose studio died on the vine because they didn't know how to do marketing, or PR, or how to get the project distributed. There is a lot more to succeeding in this industry than just build it and they will come. This is where the fantasy of being an indie separates from the reality. You'd like to dream about working on games all day, but honestly, you're going to be wearing a lot of hats. And if this company's your baby, you're probably going to be spending almost as much time answering emails, taking meetings, worrying about taxes and money and so on, as you are actually developing your game. If you're working with more than one person, I would highly recommend getting a lawyer from the outset. You don't have to use them much until it comes time to deal heavily with contracts, but someone who can help you set up your company right can save you a lot of headaches in the long run. If you can spare the $500 to $1,000 to hire a lawyer when you start to get serious about launching a game, it'll be well worth it. Once you're all set up, the key as an indie, assuming you're not working with a lot of money, is how to get visibility. The best method is going to differ wildly for different games and different studios, so here I would just recommend really studying how other games have done it. Whether it's building into the game things that people want to share, like in Minecraft, or using spaces like Congregate the way Team Meat did, there are 1,000 different methods to help your game stand out from the ever-growing crowd of indie titles out there. Just remember, going viral is something that you work for, and you have to stay on top of it. It's not just something that happens by itself, at least not 99.99% of the time. Beyond that, you'll need to figure out how you're going to get your project distributed. Getting on Steam doesn't just happen, and many of the much smaller digital distribution services aren't going to glean you more than a few dozen sales, so really think about and give yourself at least 6 months prior to launch to work on pursuing distribution. Lesson 3 is budget. This might seem simple as an indie studio. You just take the minimum amount you all need to live each month, multiply that by the number of months you expect the project to take, and voila, you got your budget. Wrong. No. Because it turns out there are licenses you're going to have to buy, and legal fees you're going to have to pay, and then there's taxes, and of course somebody's car is going to break down at some point, and then one of the computers is going to burst into flame, and you'll have to replace that, plus all the work that was on the hard drive that people forgot to back up, and all that's just the start of it. Often you build your first game simply to get people to know who you are, and to gather a small following of fans, to get people interested in you as a company and make your work stand out amongst all the less well-crafted indie games out there. Often, even if your first game wins some awards and gets some press, it's not going to sell phenomenally well. Honestly, just getting noticed is probably a more important goal for your first game than sales, but that does mean that you're going to need to plan a way to survive long enough to release your second game, so just keep that in mind. Also, another important thing to know, many game distributing companies aren't going to pay you until 30 to 90 days after they start selling it. James has seen too many indie teams suffer because they ran out of cash while waiting for that first decent-sized check. Of course, it's not the end of the world if this happens. If your game is selling well enough, people will be willing to front you some money, but that money's gonna be a lot more expensive than you'd ever want it to be. And finally, Lesson 4. Mechanics trump content. This advice is for your actual game design. As an indie, you can get away with a game that's short. Your game could be a 5-minute web game that touches us in some deeply emotional way, or even a gripping 8-hour adventure. What it absolutely must not be is 25 hours of, it's alright. Polish and scale are the weapons of the AAA world. Indies can't really compete with that, so unless you already have something spectacular or novel to offer, your focus shouldn't be about building more of it. Instead, concentrate your efforts on making that play really stand out. Too often, I see new indie companies cobble together some baseline functional mechanics, and then just start building levels and creating new content, because doing that feels like a game's getting made. It feels like tangible progress, but that is the wrong way to go about things. If you don't make sure your mechanics are right first, you're
Too bad! Too bad! Look at what game industry now! Nobody does that shit! Everyone want to be a writer! Everyone write cringy ass shit before making a game! For the last 5-6 years, most people does that. I would say that only good writing, kind of good and cheesy writing at the same times, when it comes to game, is fucking Mass Effect. Like, once you went past Mass Effect 3, there's no more. Obviously, there is. Still game does that shit, but you would say the consistency of, like, around the era, lots of people do lots of good mechanic and writing at the same times, is around the time, like, Mass Effect is still a thing. And then afterward, like, you can see, like, Ubisoft that time, around the time, is still kind of, like, doing Assassin's Creed 3. Yes, oh gosh, dang it, like, Mass Effect 3 is, like, around the time, like, Assassin's Creed, like, 3 is a thing, and also 4. Then like afterward, like I would say the total crash of like game mechanic is not being focused as a thing anymore is kind of like around the era. I can pinpoint it very fucking well, sadly. Um it was like around the era of games starting to like pick up the pace. A lot of people like basically churn out all the franchise. Like Assassin's Creed is the first victim in my personal like recognitions, like understanding. The Assassin's Creed like unities, like how fucking broken the game is itself, is the start of everything. Because everyone is chasing the next immediate game like annually, they have to churn up like one game of per franchise. So they kind of forgo a lot of things about game mechanic. They just do what works, then it works, then they use it. They don't really like polish the game. They don't really like add any idea into game stuff. Lots of things about games just basically ruined because of that. But enough complaining. Keep watching this thing. It kind of pissed me off.
You're just gonna have to redo all of that level design when you polish those mechanics. Or worse, you'll be afraid to change your mechanics for the better because of all the level design you already did. And you'll be stuck shipping a mediocre game. And remember to test early. It may scare you. It may feel like your game isn't ready or that people won't understand it, but it's almost never too early to test. You can always get valuable feedback. It's often our own egos and our fear of being hurt, of having this thing we love misunderstood or rejected, that keeps us from showing it to others in an unbiased environment. An environment where it's okay for them to rip it to shreds right in front of us. But to succeed as an independent developer, that's just something you're going to have to step past. So, to review. Lesson 1, plan your game scope well. Lesson 2, know what you're getting yourself into. Lesson 3, keep your budget realistic, with hopefully enough in the war chest to make another game if the first one doesn't sell. And Lesson 4, mechanics trump content. Good luck. We hope to be playing your game soon. See you next week. For the last 3 episodes, we've been talking about where to start when making a game. But once you've made the game you love, what are you going to do with it? Well, first you gotta find a way to let people know about it. Now, many people might say, boo, marketing and PR, boo. But if you're really gonna be an indie developer, if you're really gonna make a living off of this thing and be able to fund developing your games full time, this is a big part of your job. Besides, if you truly have a great game and you don't let people know about it, you're doing everybody a disservice. The first thing you need to do is understand your own message. Why is your game unique and interesting? With so many options for their free time, why should people play your game? What experience do you offer them that they've never been offered before? Really understanding what's going to draw players into your game is essential as you reach out to other people. As a side benefit, if you figure this out early enough, it'll also really help you make the game better when you're building it. Okay, so now that you've figured out what's special about your game and how to convey it, how do you get the word out? Well, let's assume that you've got no marketing budget. What can you do? First, you'll need to put together a few things to get noticed. These can be pretty basic. They just have to be clean, elegant, and express that core idea. One thing you'll need is a trailer. Make sure it's no more than 3 minutes long. There's plenty of free video editing software out there, so this can be done with just some elbow grease. But if you got a friend who's already done some editing before, it might be time to call in a favor. The other thing you'll need is a website. Something basic is fine. It could even be WordPress. It just has to look presentable. Simple and professional is a lot better than complex and amateur. Once you have those, it's time to enter your game into the indie game competitions. Getting into something like IGF is a great way to get your game noticed, and it's essentially free. There are small fees attached to some of them, but it's trivial compared to any paid marketing or PR. Second, start communicating with other people in the game industry over social media. See if you can get your game into the hands of one of the tastemakers out there. If somebody like Tim Schafer tweets about your game, a lot of people, including media people, are going to perk up. Again, don't be shy about calling in favors here. Next, mail all of the game news sites. Now you might think, I'll never get picked up by somebody like Rock Paper Shotgun or Destructoid or Kotaku, but the truth is, their job is to have content. That's what catches eyes and generates ad revenue. If it's a slow news day, they'll absolutely post about a tiny indie game if it looks interesting. And start also giving some love to the smaller game sites that really focus on your genre. Whether it's intense strategy wargaming or quiet emotive experiences, there are sites dedicated to the aspect of play that your game focuses on, and that's where you'll find your early adopters and your most vocal evangelists. As your game goes towards launch, figure out how you're going to build up the attention as the launch closes in. Consider doing a Reddit AMA, or go on podcasts. Release new screenshots and trailers frequently, and make sure to let all the media sites know each time you do it. Once you've done all that, it's time to launch. But where are you going to launch your game? Well, there are a ton of options here. First off, there are, of course, traditional digital distributors like Good Old Games and Steam. We'll talk a little bit more about Steam in a bit, but don't be afraid to reach out to these services. They may seem like these monolithic entities where real games go, and you may think that your game is beneath their notice. Don't worry about that. Digital distributors are actually a lot easier to get your game on than many people think. They make their money off of every sale you make, whether you sell 100 or 100,000 copies. And since it doesn't really cost them anything to put more products up on their store, they're generally pretty happy to work with anybody who has a reasonably well put together product. As for Steam in particular, just know that you're really going to have to do that press and PR stuff I mentioned earlier if you want to make it past greenlight. But when you're thinking about distribution, also think beyond the traditional digital distributors. The various mobile app stores out there actually reach way more customers than Steam does by a fairly wide margin. Sites like Congregate and Newgrounds allow your audience instant access to your game from basically any PC in the world, and provide you an opportunity to get feedback every second of every day. Specialty distributors like Slytherin can really help you reach a niche. Heck, Xbox One, the PS4, and the Wii U all have digital stores as well, and while they are more difficult to get into than some of the PC distributors, it's actually easier to get access to these as a developer than it's ever been, since all of these companies are looking for unique selling points for their platforms. Even Facebook is a distribution possibility. Don't rule out anything. Think about how your game plays and where it's going to find its audience, and put it there. And this is where I'm going to make my one Unity plug, because Unity makes porting your game to new platforms really simple.
This ages
the real
so
answer to the
well.
question, where should I distribute
This
my game,
ages
is
so well.
everywhere you can.
And then everyone
Back
look
when
at,
James started working in
not
games,
well,
porting
not
a game
so
was
well,
a
like,
nightmare.
so not
it
well.
required tons of work. You'd
Okay,
often have
Unity
to pay
now.
tens of thousands
Yeah.
of dollars to some outsourced company to
what
have
the
them
fuck
port
is
the
that?
game for you, and you would just cross your fingers and hope they did a good job. The one-button porting promise of Unity isn't entirely accurate. You're probably going to have to get in there and still fiddle with some things, but still though, for those of us who have had to port games before engines like Unity were a thing, the difference is amazing. Go get your games out there in as many ways as you can. And once you do, then comes the hard part, supporting your game and accepting its flaws. Just going through the exercise of exposing your work to the internet and seeing the feedback you get has value. It's tough, and it will hurt, and there will be plenty of times that your beautiful baby comes back covered in somebody else's slime-covered filth, but for all that, you'll learn so much more about where you could go with your game, and what it needs to truly shine. Way more than you'll learn from just testing it with friends. Your future games will be better just for having really released a game. And lastly, support your title. This means bug fixes and gameplay updates and all that stuff that we've come to expect, but it also means keeping in touch with fans and the media, planning out sales and promotions, even doing the headache of accounting if you're not giving your game away for free. Well, with that, we say good luck and good creating. We hope to be playing some of your games soon. See you next week. Alright, so I know I said the guest art marathon was over before, and it is. This is for something different. Okay, so during our fundraiser for Allison, our friends over at 9 Dot Studios put together $1,000 to contribute, which means they get to pick a topic. So they asked us to talk a little bit about what it's really like to work in the industry and some of the bad practices that go on, because 9 Dots was founded on the very principle of getting away from all that stuff. And frankly, that's a topic we've been planning to do for a long time, so we're happy to oblige. And as an added bonus, the team's lead artist volunteered to do the art. Allow me to introduce Etienne Vanier. Glad to have you with us. So, here we go. Many people see the game industry as all Nerf gun fights and miniatures in your cubicle, and that's how the industry usually likes to portray itself, but that's not really what we are.
At our best, we're an alchemist's lab, the Ames Research Center, Michelangelo's workshop, and the City Lights bookstore all rolled into one. But at our worst, we keep the same hours as a sweatshop. We have the maturity level of a preschool and the fiscal responsibility of a subprime mortgage trader. Most of you will be familiar with the story of Team Bondi, the team that made LA Noire. Over the span of 8 years, they were only able to turn out one game after blowing through over $100 million. They went through almost perpetual crunch time, with 12-hour days, 7 days a week, often being considered the norm. They were run by a tyrannical boss who would circumvent his leads and shout at individual employees in the middle of the office at the slightest provocation. And in the end, when their one product was forced out the door, with a great deal of help from Rockstar staff, most of the people who worked on it were maliciously left off the credits, because the studio heads didn't want to give credit to anyone who didn't endure this the whole way through. In fact, so many people were left off the credits that Bondi employees took it upon themselves to create a web page offering the correct credits. And after all that, after the product finally shipped, well, the company sold off all its assets and filed for bankruptcy. And though many of us salivate over any Rockstar title, the truth is that LA Noire still didn't live up to what it could have been. One game, 8 years of hell, and you're out of a job. That's pretty bad. But honestly, in this industry, it's not anywhere near as uncommon a story as it should be. I mean, it took 7 years of this for these issues to even get out to the public. And therein lies the first problem with working conditions in this industry. When anyone complains about the long hours or the unreasonable management, they'll often be reminded how lucky they are to be working in this industry. I've met people who told me that during the first 2 or 3 years of their career, they were essentially intimidated into going above and beyond, all to compensate for bad business practices or incompetence from above. They were regularly told, you will never find another job in this industry if you quit. And it's true, before you ship your first game, it's really easy to think that if you lose your job, you'll never get to work on a game again. Beyond that, we often create a culture in our studios where if you leave before 7 p.m., you're looked at like a traitor. Now, I will readily admit it, I'm actually not opposed to the idea of crunch time. I think that artists will very often choose to make sacrifices for their art. I mean, there's a lot in this life that each of us have given up to walk the paths we've taken, and we don't regret it. But sacrifice must come with a purpose. There has to be a good reason. Now, we could take a whole episode talking about this, but James works from a principle called modular design. You figure out what the minimum shippable product is, and then you figure out all the ancillary features that would improve the game but don't fundamentally alter how you develop the core of the product. For example, shooting would be part of the core feature set in a Call of Duty game, but things like killstreak rewards would probably be one of the modular features. As a designer, you should be able to design the core of your game so that your team can create and ship it without anyone having to crunch. Otherwise, you've failed at your job. But in every department, you're going to find modular features which are going to be really hard to spend some overtime. If people want to make a great game, they'll put in the hours it takes to make some of those extra features happen. But at least then, people know what they're crunching for. They have a purpose, and they can see an end in sight. Having specific features you're personally motivated to spend extra hours working on is totally different than a studio-wide mandatory death march, where the entire crew is putting in excessive hours with no particular goal except maybe eventually shipping the product, all because of poor planning somewhere up the chain. And that's another problem. We're just getting the hang of management and scheduling in this industry. And it sounds ridiculous to say that about a multi-billion-dollar international high-tech field like this one, but the truth is that for the longest time, we as an industry pretty much relied on the idea that, oh, we'll just work extra hard if our estimates turn out to be wrong, which, as you can imagine, leads to a lot of games falling apart and never shipping at all. Also, as we mentioned a while back, we still don't have a clear idea of what a producer does in this industry, so you get wild variance in both the quality and actual responsibilities of management. But the developers aren't the only ones at fault. If you choose to work in this industry, you'll almost certainly have a project canceled or a studio close underneath you for reasons that have nothing to do with that studio. As game studio consolidation increases and more studios end up wholly owned by their publishers, a developer has less and less control over their own fate. James once worked for a company where everyone seemed to know that a particular partner studio was going to be closed by the end of the fiscal year, except the developers at the studio itself. The publisher company was just waiting a little longer for tax reasons. And the studio wasn't being closed because it was bad either, just because the project they were working on wasn't estimated to have as high a return as other potential products the publisher was thinking about pursuing. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a business. And as terrible as this can be for a developer, this really isn't the publisher's fault. If the publisher's making smart decisions to ensure that they're able to put out a wider selection of better games in the future, then sure, I understand triage is sometimes necessary. But you know what is a publisher's fault? Unreasonable demands. Often, working conditions in game studios become hellish because the publisher asks for things that simply can't be accomplished without slavish labor, and the developer has no choice but to comply. Worse still, the things publishers demand from these studios are often unnecessary or even counterproductive. The mildest of these harmful demands is the request for unreasonable milestones. James has worked with more than one publisher who feels that it's a good practice to push the development team and try to maximize the workload you can get out of them. This is fundamentally a breakdown of trust. Like we said in our publishing episode, this comes from the publisher mindset that your developers are somehow trying to cheat you or pull a fast one on you so they can be lazy. But really, if that's the attitude your developer really has, no form of aggressive milestone is going to help you. I mean, they're just going to cheat you anyway. And if they aren't trying to cheat you, then you've really only succeeded in driving the team into the ground. Overly aggressive milestones force a team to crunch when it's not necessary, which leads to sloppy, rushed work and exhausted developers. Worse still, from the publisher's perspective, it often leads to corner cutting, and milestone builds that are more kludged smoke and mirror tricks than real demonstrations of gameplay. But the truly tragic moments come when the publisher requests something grueling that won't even help the end product. This usually comes in one of two ways. Either the publisher's feeling pressure to have a big showing at a press or a promotional event, or the publisher's gotten a hold of some buzzword or piece of industry wisdom which they think all their games now need. Let's talk about the press demos first. Scraping together a demo takes time. It pulls team members away from the predicted development path and generally throws the schedule into chaos, especially if milestones and ship dates aren't adjusted to take account of such things. In the worst cases, a studio can get sucked into a perpetual press cycle, where after E3 they're asked to have a demo for PAX, and then a Gamescom demo, and then maybe something prepared for Game Informer to see when they wander into the office, over and over to the point where they are practically working on 2 parallel builds of the game. And sure, some of the work done from the demos can be salvaged, but you'd be surprised how much rushed demo work has to be redone or scrapped entirely afterwards. But the second case is the real project killer. When publishers get a bee in their bonnet, they'll sometimes mandate the inclusion of specific features, even long after development's begun. James had several friends working on first-person shooters whose projects were essentially destroyed when competitive multiplayer became really hot, because they were all told that all first-person shooters must include competitive multiplayer, or consumers won't buy them. Obviously, we all know this to be false, but that didn't stop a lot of games from getting absolutely crippled. If you look back at all the mediocre shooters released between 2007 and 2009, with what feels like tacked-on multiplayer features, I can almost guarantee you that's what happened. It's a shame, too, because some of those games might have been amazing single-player experiences if they just left well enough alone. But despite everything I just said, it's not our intent to scare you off, because things are slowly getting better, and we as an industry are getting better at what we do with every passing year. There are plenty of studios opening up like 9dots with the stated goal of getting away from some of these practices. There are also more opportunities now for studios to do so with digital distribution, mobile, and social games. So things are looking up, but just consider this a heads up for what to watch out for if you're starting your career. And so, future designers, producers, and, well, really leads from any field, it's in your hands to create the conditions that'll help us all create better games. A little more planning, a little more being honest with ourselves, and hopefully the industry you work in won't have the same disappointments of the industry today. Thanks again to Mr. Vanier, and thanks to you guys for watching. We'll see you next week. Now here's another subject we've had loads of people emailing us about: game reviewing. Before we get into it though, I feel like I should throw in a disclaimer because none of us have ever been game reviewers. We know quite a few game reviewers, and we spent some time talking with them about the subject before we sat down to write this, but it's just not something we've ever done ourselves. Just putting that out there. Alright, now that's out of the way. Most of the emails we get about this topic generally contain one of two questions. How do I get into game reviewing? And what are your thoughts on the state of game reviewing today? Let's get the easy one out of the way first. How do you become a game reviewer? The answer is actually pretty straightforward. Review games. Build yourself a blog or a website and see how much traffic you can get for your reviews. Try to find some angle or style that makes you stand out from the 10,000 other reviewers out there, and start getting yourself a loyal following of readers. Once your site has a respectable amount of traffic, then you can contact one of the major websites and see if they're looking for another reviewer. Often they'll put out job postings, so always be on the lookout for those. When you're trying to get in touch with the larger sites, one of your best options is to go to conventions and get to know the other people covering the scene. It's a great way to distinguish yourself. Believe me, a little FaceTime goes a long way. Also, your college may be able to help you land an internship at one of these companies before you graduate, which is another great way to start. Just be warned, being a reviewer is not as much fun as it sounds. Being topical is of the utmost importance in this profession, so often reviewers will get 3 or 4 days to get through a 40-hour game. Every single reviewer told us the same thing. Most of the time when they're playing to get a review out, it's nothing like when they're playing for fun. Mostly in that it's not fun. Several of the people I know even told me of experiencing game burnout. They stopped playing games at home because they just had too much of it during the workday. Also, game reviewers aren't paid very well. There's just too many people out there who want to be game reviewers. If you think you're going to be living the high life reviewing games, you might want to think again. But if that stuff doesn't scare you off, go grab a domain, start up a WordPress account, and make with the reviews. Good luck to you. Which of course leads us to the slightly trickier of the two questions. What are our thoughts on the state of game reviewing today? Well, first off, there's the omnipresent complaint that game reviewers are paid by the same people they're reviewing. It's true, and it's a valid complaint, but luckily it's starting to become a little less true. Slowly, game sites are getting advertisement from outside the game industry. And really, I'm not sure how much of an effect it has in the end. Clearly there's some effect. I mean, we all know that major game companies with big marketing pushes rarely
And it's not a thing anymore. Nobody trusts IGN. Not a thing anymore.
James has a
Can you
very
skip
strange
that?
supposition about how to teach game design to somebody who's never done it before. And I don't mean teach in the casual sense, I mean like teaching in a formal setting at the university level. Because as many schools as we have out there offering game design programs, most of them are still trying to figure out this problem. How do you properly teach game design? James has had so many students come up to him and say, my schooling didn't really prepare me for the life I wanted. It didn't really prepare me to be a game designer. And it's led him to wonder if perhaps we need to take a whole new approach to how we do this. More than this, though, it's also the fact that he's had more and more professionals come up to him lately saying that when hiring for junior positions, they don't put any special emphasis on people who have a game design degree, because many of the people they've hired from game design programs haven't proven to be better candidates. In fact, they've often proven to be less adaptable than those with other educational backgrounds. Overall, it's really made him question how we go about educating designers. And after putting a lot of thought into it, the strange hypothesis he's come up with is that we're perhaps teaching too much game at game schools. I know that sounds odd, but hear me out. We learned long ago that we shouldn't just teach designers tools and software. Game engines and 3D software, a game designer should be able to pick those up on the job. Every company I've ever worked for has had its own unique scripting language, or at least its own crazy additions and modifications to the tools they use. So simply learning a piece of software isn't enough, because tools change constantly, and they're not universally applicable. If you've learned Maya, but then you find yourself working on a 2D mobile game, well, Maya's not gonna do you much good. If you learned Unreal 3 a mere half-decade ago, that knowledge is practically worthless today. So much of the industry has moved on to other engines, and even those using Unreal now are working with such a radically different version that what one might have actually learned in classes on Unreal 3 doesn't have a lot of application today. And most schools have realized this. They stopped just teaching tools long ago. Instead, they went on to teach courses like level design and game balancing. But here's the thing, level design and game balancing are actually just tools as well. They aren't fundamentals. They aren't the key skills that a designer needs to be a good designer. James talked about this at GDC, and in preparing to do so, he asked many of the professional designers he knew what they really look for in a fellow designer. And it basically boiled down to these things. First, communication. You need the ability to express the design to members of all the different departments clearly and concisely. Second, collaboration. You need to be able to work with people from many different fields and with many different mindsets. The ability to take feedback and to really incorporate it in your design. Third, a love of learning. You need the ability to be able to pick new things up quickly, because different projects will require developing an in-depth knowledge of different things. You might have to learn about the flowers of the English countryside or the weapons of World War II, not to mention figuring out the scripting engine and the pipeline and the peculiar quirks of whatever team and studio you're working with. And a designer needs to love doing it to really do the kind of deep dives that allow them to add the little touches that really make a project special. Fourth, scope. You need to be capable of creating realistic design plans and the willingness to cut even the parts you personally love the most in service of the project as a whole. Fifth, logical thinking. You need to be able to build and work with logical systems, as that's the foundation of most game systems and scripting languages. Sixth, lateral thinking. You need to be able to see problems from a new perspective and find answers outside of those that are traditionally used. Seventh, a breadth of knowledge. This is the only one on this list that I think is debatable, but most designers I know like to see potential applicants have knowledge of things other than just games, as this gives them a greater field to draw from when solving design problems, which in turn leads to better solutions. And if you look at this list, you'll see one commonality. None of those things are really game-specific skills. It doesn't matter if you're coming in as a level designer or a systems designer, I'd rather see that you have good communication and collaboration skills, a sense of scope, and the ability to learn quickly than to have a level design or system design course on your resume. So as utterly batty as it might sound, in a world where we only have a very limited number of courses to prepare you to be an effective designer, I would rather see us cut the game-specific courses from game design degrees if it meant us being able to provide a better grounding in the rest of those skills. If James had to make a guess, he would wager that a well-formulated game design course would actually look a lot like this. First, a hardcore focus on the liberal arts. And when I say hardcore, I mean challenging to the point where failure is not uncommon. It would include a grounding in the philosophy and literature that makes up the Western tradition, along with a focus on psychology and mathematics. The variety and volume of the material here would hammer in the ability to rapidly assimilate new materials, and the courses would be taught in a discussion format, with regular papers to train up communication skills in both the verbal and written medium. All rote tests and quizzes would be abandoned, as this education is far more concerned with how the students are using and playing with the ideas they're exposed to than with their absolute retention of the details therein. Additionally, the pillar of mathematics in the course would be strong, with at least one math class per semester. This encourages logical thinking and gives students the one almost universally applicable design skill. Next, 1 to 2 courses in formalized logic would also be a possibility, as this also reinforces the logic training and makes the jump to scripting easier for designers who don't have much experience with scripting languages. And then, anchoring the program, each semester would have an underlying mega-course project course that all students must take, where they actually make games. Every semester, month in and month out, every month they're there. The best way to learn to make games is to make them. This course would be given at least twice the credit hours of most courses, and students would be expected to spend a fair amount of time outside the class on this course. In this course, the students would work in teams, preferably interdisciplinary teams if the school can support that, to create a game that integrates an idea or topic from the other courses. This would build collaboration skills, teach scope, and build lateral thinking muscles, as the constraint of having to incorporate elements from their core liberal arts courses will force them to rethink traditional game genres, or force them out of established genres entirely. Such a degree would probably preclude large class sizes and would require someone with a fair amount of development experience to mentor the students in the project course. But if that could be achieved, it would produce far more adaptable designers that are far better prepared for the industry and far more desirable as potential employees. Way more so than those that simply have a smattering of game balancing courses to their name. Anyway, I hope that sparks some ideas. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Hey guys, please join me in welcoming our guest buddy, Sarah White, known as Shira-chan on DeviantArt, and creator of the Fluffernutters webcomic. She's gonna help us tackle something you guys have been asking about for a long time: game schools. We've been planning this episode for a while because it's something that needs talking about. Game schools are one of the greatest things to happen to our industry, but at the same time, they're also one of the worst. While many are a place to experiment and to learn, many others are nothing but repellent leeches, working on loopholes in our educational system to defraud kids. It's one of the most heinous and inexcusable crimes in our industry, but every day I see schools exploiting somebody's dreams to leave him $100,000 in debt with a meaningless degree that will not get them anywhere. And that has to stop. We're going to avoid talking about any specific school, and instead focus on what to look for if you're thinking about going to a game school, so it's useful for anyone, even if you're watching this a few years down the road. Because too many game schools out there prey on the fact that parents don't know how to vet these schools like they would a traditional college, in order to make a profit off students who want to believe in a dream. So first off, here's the scam. While there are many legitimate game schools out there, many of them are for profit, which opens us up to a host of illegitimate profit-driven schools. What these schools do is send out recruiters or put up advertising that promises that if you go to their schools, you'll get to become a game developer. You remember that dumb old tighten up the graphics on level 3 ad? If not, look it up, it's hilarious. That ad has nothing to do with what a game developer actually does, but that's the sort of vision they try to sell. They try to hook people in by selling them the idea that they'll get to play games for a living, or they'll get to tell people their grandiose ideas and get them made, when that's simply a lie. These schools try to target people who either don't want to go to a traditional college but whose parents are telling them they have to go somewhere, or people who really want to get into the industry but don't have a support network that'll guide them to a better school. Worse still, these schools tend to target students whose high school grades and SAT scores might not be enough to get them into a traditional college that'll get them the career they want. They often tend to sympathize and say they understand, but hey, games are a creative industry. Just because a person didn't do well in high school is no reason to keep them from working in games, which is true, but it walks a dangerous line toward falsehood, because what many of these schools are actually doing is simply accepting anybody who's willing to sign the loan papers. They might claim otherwise, but they have no real entrance requirements other than being willing to pay. And even worse, these schools are usually barely accredited, often maintaining their accreditation by buying failing colleges that have a better accreditation rating. Also, they can skirt the minimum requirements the government demands to give out a diploma. And unfortunately, this means that none of the credits from these schools usually transfer. So if a student wants to transfer out, or goes through the program, can't find a job, and wants to get another degree, they have to start all over. But what makes this, to me, seem criminal is that these schools are aware that the education they're giving doesn't remotely leave the students with the skills they need to actually get into the industry. A few people might come out of these schools and actually land a job, but that is due to their strength as an individual, not to anything the school gave them. So, now you know the dangers, let's talk about how to find a good game school. First, you have to decide if a game school is right for you. I'll be totally frank, it's completely possible to get into the game industry by going through a traditional education. I mean, James got his bachelor's in classics. A solid traditional foundation means a lot. You can get a degree in computer science from any reputable school if you want to be a programmer. You can take a liberal art or a math-related major if you want to be a designer. Or you can go to a conservatory if you want to be an artist. You're just going to have to do a lot of extra work on the side making games for your portfolio, and getting out to things like GDC to meet industry people while you're keeping up with all your other classes. Additionally, traditional education also usually offers an opportunity to experience more disciplines, and transfer to a wide range of other things if you find that games aren't really what you want to do. But let's say that you're dead set on working in the game industry. That is what you want to do with your life. So a game school's probably right for you, but you better be prepared to work. Any game school worth its salt is going to push you harder than most traditional colleges. Regardless of what discipline you're taking, programming, design, art, sound, there's way more to learn about making games than they'll ever have time to teach you. So be prepared to work more than you have ever done in your life. If you think you're mature enough to handle the workload and self-directed enough to continue learning even outside of what's taught in class, then you are probably ready for game school. So how do you find a good one? Follow these steps. Step 1. Check their accreditation status. They should have it posted on their site. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but a regional accreditation is usually considered better than a national one. But you want to make sure that they're at least accredited by one of the national accreditation institutions. If not, don't go there. Achieving national accreditation is a pretty low barrier for some place calling itself a school. If they can't even manage that, they're not worth your money. Step 2. Look at their entrance requirements. If they look too good to be true, they are. Any good school will tell you what the average SAT score of their successful applicants is. If they aren't looking for you to fall in the top 30% of test takers out there, they're probably not asking enough to truly prepare you for the industry. As a rule of thumb, you want your school to expect a lot from you. Step 3. Look up any awards the school or the students may have won. This step's a little biased toward schools that have been around longer, but if an educational facility is really preparing you to do top-tier work, the evidence should be out there. See if they've ever gotten one of their students' games entered into IGF, IGC, Indiecade, the PAX 10, or any of the other game awards that are judged by professional developers. It's a great way to see what the industry thinks of that school. Step 4. Look for games out in the marketplace that have been made by teams largely composed of students from the school. Games like World of Goo, Portal, or anything by that game company are good examples. Now this one isn't a deal breaker by a long shot, but it's a good plus if they have it. Step 5. Ask the school what their hiring ratio is in the industry, not including jobs in QA. Not every faculty member will know, but they should be able to instantly direct you to someone who does. They shouldn't be wishy-washy about this detail at all. If they get dodgy about answering, that should set off some alarm bells. Step 6. See if they have paid recruiters. As a general rule of thumb, I've found that you want to avoid any school that pays headhunters to find students. This practice is sketchy enough by itself, but if they pay those headhunters by commission, giving them a bonus for each student they get to sign the payment contract, then you really need to watch out. A good school will attract students without these sort of predatory practices. Step 7. Check out the professors. Have they done anything noteworthy? Are they names you might recognize? If you Google their names, are they cited by other industry members? Have they shown up in the press or been asked to speak at industry conferences? Good faculty is essential to a good game school. This doesn't mean that they have to all be notable, but at least having 1 or 2 people you know are highly regarded within the industry or academia certainly helps. Step 8. Look for portfolios of students from that school. Many students will put up their work on their websites as part of their efforts to get a job. After looking at a few, you should be able to get a general sense of what level of work that school is turning out. Step 9. Along with the portfolio, I recommend looking on Game Career Guide for articles written by students of your prospective college. It'll not only tell you something about the school, but also the level of writing that the better students are coming out of the school with. Step 10. If the school markets themselves to you as being in any way about playing video games, this is one of the clear red flags. Do not, I repeat, do not go to such schools. Step 11. Look at the course descriptions. If you're looking to get into the industry rather than becoming an academic, you need to do project work. So make sure that a decent number of the classes are project-focused. Writing a design doc means nothing when you're competing with students who've made entire games. Also, if most of the courses seem to be focused on teaching you tools, like teaching you Unity, the Unreal Engine, Mudbox, or the like, then it's probably not very good. Any game developer will tell you that you should be able to learn tools on your own because you're going to be spending your entire career learning new tools. It's the fundamentals you need to learn from a college education. And finally, perhaps the most controversial thing I'm going to say, at the undergrad level, look for a 4-year degree. Anyone who tells you that they'll make you a game developer in 2 years is pretty much straight up lying to you. Now, there are very, very few exceptions, Vancouver Film School being one of them, but even at the best of these schools, the students who really make it often have already taken some college or have a degree. If a school promises to make your dreams come true in a highly competitive, highly technical industry in just 2 years, you better research it completely before you gamble thousands of dollars and 2 years of your life on what is probably an empty promise. Game schools are great, and will be a big part of helping this industry grow. I encourage you to go to them if being part of this industry is what you're passionate about. I hope this has helped some of you, and I really hope it steers you away from the predatory schools. It's time they stopped getting rewarded for such practices. Good luck. See you all next week.
Many people have requested that we give a few more tips on how to start being a game designer. So this week, we're going to cover how to play games like a designer. Now, we've already talked about how a designer's job isn't just playing games, but a designer must understand a lot of games. They have to know how a set of independent mechanics translate into a specific user experience. They have to know the conventions that genres follow, and they have to understand how games relate so they can reference them when trying to explain mechanics of their own. In order to do this, they must experience games as a designer. The first thing you have to learn as a designer is the hardest, to observe while you are experiencing. This is an incredibly hard skill to master. For most of us, the act of observing fundamentally colors our experience. Rigorous observation makes it harder to experience joy and excitement because you're so focused on trying to capture and analyze every second. On the flip side, while simply experiencing, you tend to miss the important details hidden in the most exhilarating moments, as you're caught up in the rush of what's going on. As a designer, you must get past this and learn to be in the moment while you observe it. Now, I know that may sound like some sort of mystic designer nonsense, but trust me, it's a very learnable skill. Try beginning with activities that are extremely visceral but non-interactive. To start, take a ride on a roller coaster. Try and observe at which points you're excited, scared, exhilarated, relieved, surprised, upset, uncomfortable. Try and understand why you're experiencing any major emotion as you're experiencing it. Try to take in as many of the details as you can. How fast are you going? Is the track banking? Which way and why? What can you see? What do you smell? What are the moments that led up to this one? How was it set up? What were you thinking right before and during? What are the sounds around you? How does this all come together to shape the moment you're experiencing right now? Next, try to go to a rock concert and do the same thing. If you can manage it, try to go 2 different nights and experience the show from different positions. Be in the pit one night and up on the balcony the next. How do your experiences compare? How do they contrast? Once you begin to assimilate this skill, you'll start to notice things around you on an increasingly subtle level. You'll start to notice how the conversation you were having at a bar synced up to the rhythm of the music, or how the smell of lilacs helped convince you that the food in the farmer's market was fresh. And then you'll begin to be able to take in other people's reactions in greater detail. At first, you may notice the fact that the lady next to you on the roller coaster is throwing her hands up in the air and screaming. Later, you might notice that her long hair ruins the experience for the passenger behind her whenever you go downhill. Once you've started to hone that skill, you can start working on recognizing your biases. Now, what do we mean by biases? Obviously, there are the larger ones you're probably aware of, like your preferences for certain genres or styles of play. But there are subtler, more insidious biases we all pick up throughout our years of playing games. These are the biases of familiarity. You've all been playing games for a while. Have you ever popped in a new game for the first time, taken one glance at the HUD and known what 90% of it meant without ever having to look at the manual or play a tutorial? Ever have a pretty good idea of what buttons are going to do what based on the genre of game you're playing? These are our learned biases. Know exactly how to hold a controller? Yep, that's a bias too. If you know your biases, you'll be able to put yourself in a mental space where you'll be able to examine what you would have otherwise glossed over. And while much of this acquired knowledge is something that you'll want to integrate into your game, because, hey, providing your target audience with something they're familiar with can be very beneficial, a lot of innovation comes from re-examining these things, and a lot of failed game projects took these things for granted, or didn't consider how they could be improved. One of the biggest revolutions in first-person shooters came when the guys at Bungie asked themselves the question, why do all first-person shooters have health meters? For those of you who remember Doom, you probably remember that the same room could be one of the toughest challenges in gaming if you came into it with no armor and a single digit of health, or a cakewalk if you were maxed out on both. Regenning health allowed designers to create vastly better levels, because they could now anticipate exactly how much health a player would have when they entered a room. And it's actually much more conducive to the genre to have a mechanic that basically says, if you're getting shot this much in this amount of time, you're probably doing something wrong. Try it again. Than it is to have the player whittle down the enemy, run to retrieve health, and then come back. Of course, on the downside, removing health also seemed to remove all the exploration and hidden secrets from the genre, as it took out the necessity to scour levels as a means of survival, a consequence which few first-person shooter designers seem to consider these days. But anyway, you see what being aware of your biases can do. Jeez, we have got a lot left to cover. You know what? Let's make this a two-parter. Next week, we're going to go over why a game designer must play a variety of games, both good and bad, how much time you should spend playing them, and then go into the nitty-gritty of some of the specific things you should do while you play. See you guys next time for part 2. Later. Hi everyone. We've been wanting to do one of these episodes for programmers and developers forever, but none of us have ever worked as one, so that made writing this episode a little tricky. Fortunately for us, the guys down at Stack Exchange have heroically stepped in and offered to make this episode happen. In fact, they offered up so much great information that we're going to make this a two-parter. For those of you who've never heard of them, Stack Exchange is a great resource for developers. Pretty much everyone I know goes there when they have questions, so especially if you're starting out, put it on your list of places to visit. Alright, onward. Programmers, or as many of them prefer to be called, developers. What do they actually do? Most people have a vague image of a guy sitting in a basement in front of a computer, typing arcane commands into a terminal and chugging Mountain Dew. Of course, there's much more to it than that. So what does it mean to be a developer? Like most jobs, developing software takes on a lot of different forms, but the heart of it comes down to problem solving. Designing a new system architecture, implementing a feature, finding and fixing bugs, all of these come down to analyzing a problem, breaking it down into its essential pieces, and coming up with a solution. As a developer on a team, you can pretty much consider yourself chief problem solver. So what does that kind of problem solving look like? David here had a pretty helpful anecdote. The third class he took in his computer science program was designed to introduce students to real-world software development, and he thought that sounded great. They'd get to work on some real-world problems that people have. So he was a bit surprised when they got their big group assignment that counted for most of their grade. He and his partner were told to build an M&M sorting robotic arm using Legos, a pair of servo motors, and a webcam. This was very different from other classes he'd taken up to that point. Those were pretty straightforward. Here's a loop. Now go write a bunch of stuff using loops. This class was asking him to do things they had no idea how to do. There was no chapter in the textbook on sorting M&Ms. There was no website they could go to with a tutorial on how to build a robotic arm out of servos and Legos. At least, there wasn't then. There probably is now. They just had to figure it out. Now, one way to look at this would be to say that he spent 4 weeks learning some truly useless skills. And since that class, he's never worked with servo motors, webcams, pathfinding algorithms, or M&Ms. But in reality, this turned out to be exactly what real-world development's like. The next summer, he got an internship at a real software company. And the first day he showed up, he was given an assignment working with technologies he'd never heard of, solving problems that nobody at the company had solved before. Real development is about solving problems. Whether you're a game developer working on a physics system, a web developer working on a user interface, or a quantitative finance developer working on a new financial model, it all comes down to breaking down the problem and finding a solution. So if that's what being a developer is, what makes someone really great at this? First, a great developer is someone who is exceptionally good at analytical and abstract thinking. You need to be able to take a system apart, analyze each piece, and figure out how it all fits together. If you're the kind of person who even thinks about being a developer, you've probably done this from an early age. Growing up, David here would spend hours in his best friend's garage taking things apart. Computers, vacuum cleaners, TVs, whatever they could get their hands on. So if analytical thinking is at the core of being a developer, how do you get better at it? Simple. By finding ways to feed the analytical side of your brain.
Study math, science, logic, proofs, even puzzles. Anything that emphasizes understanding and applying concepts, rather than just memorizing facts and figures. Dive into existing systems and figure out how they work. Ask yourself what problems the designers were trying to solve here, and why they solved it the way they did. Take things apart and put them back together, literally and metaphorically. Analyze the games you play and the software you use to figure out what makes them work, why the designers did it the way they did, how they could have done it better. All of these things will build up your analytical thinking and make you a better developer. And this touches on the second most important trait of a developer. Every developer has to solve problems, but what separates good ones from great ones is their ability to solve them quickly and elegantly. And often what makes the difference there is having a wide body of tools and experience to draw from. Think of it this way. I'm pretty sure that if you gave me the tools, I could make something resembling a treehouse. Now, give those same tools to a real carpenter, and he would do it much faster, and end up with something much less likely to kill you. The difference between me and the professional is that the professional knows what tools to use for each job, specific techniques for solving problems he's seen before, and a whole lot more about what needs to be done. The same applies to programming. What separates the experts from the novices is a wide knowledge of what tools and techniques exist, and a deep knowledge of when and how to apply them. So how do you get better at this? By being an explorer. Computer programming may have been around a while, but it's still very much in its infancy. So new techniques and approaches are being developed all the time. If you want to be a great developer, you need to stay on top of these changes. When new languages, frameworks, techniques, or methodologies surface, explore them and see what they can teach you. Don't just read about them. Get your hands dirty and write some code. You may find a new tool that'll be perfect for a job someday, or a new library that does exactly what you need, a language that's tailor-made for particular problems, or you may just learn a new approach to solving problems. The goal is to accumulate as many tools on your tool belt as possible, so that when the time comes, you'll know exactly what to use. Unfortunately, exploration's generally discouraged in the workplace, often for good reason. Your boss doesn't want you to be constantly trying out the latest technique or language on a critical production system. So most of your exploration will happen on side projects outside of work, and that's just part of being a good developer. The best developers are constantly writing code and exploring new tools and techniques in and out of work. Of course, exploration also means learning from other people. Everybody approaches problems differently, so looking at how other people solve problems is essential to widening your perspective and learning to be a better developer. There are a few different ways to do this. First, read other people's code. There's a wealth of sample and open source code available on the internet, so don't be afraid to take an existing project apart and see how it works. You'll learn how they structured the project, how they solved particular problems, and probably what they could have done better. Second, find smart developers to work with. If you're a student, try to get an internship at a company where you'll be writing production code. Find an open source project that interests you and start submitting fixes and suggestions. When you're on a team, seek out the more experienced developers. Look at their code and ask them to critique yours. Finally, get involved in the broader community. There are a dozen places to do this online. Hacker News, GitHub, IRC, even good old Slashdot, or Stack Overflow. Better yet, get involved in open source and give back to the community. If you're in a major city, find a local developer group to meet up with. All of these will help you to explore the wide world of programming. They'll teach you new ideas, new techniques, and new ways to solve problems. Well, that's it for part 1. Next week, we'll be back to talk about the importance of communication, as well as many other skills a developer needs. See you then.
Hi.
At long last, the guest art marathon is finally coming to an end. Allison is recovered and ready to come back starting next week. But first, we have one final guest here to wrap this marathon up nice. It is my pleasure to introduce Lily Scaldaferri, a good friend of ours. She's a student at VFS and the artist behind the weekly webcomic Name Game. And this week, she's going to help us to talk about one of the less appreciated roles in the game industry, the producer. When James goes to talk at different schools, he periodically has people come up to him and say, "I really want to be a producer." It doesn't happen that often, but it's a great thing to see. The industry needs more exceptional junior producers. In fact, it needs more devoted producers at all levels, because production failures are one of the most common things to sink projects, or turn crunch time into a death march. But, like I said, not many people come forward with that career in mind. Far more students are itching to be designers, and it's not that hard to understand why. Production hasn't been mythologized in popular culture quite the same way design has.
And maybe that's not a bad thing, but it does mean that often even the people who want to become producers only have a vague and nebulous idea of what a producer does. And really, who can blame them? Even the industry doesn't have a clear consensus on what a producer does. Every studio treats them a little bit differently and breaks down their responsibilities in different ways. Heck, we even give them different titles. If you're entering the industry as a producer, your first job could be associate producer, junior producer, just plain old producer. But one thing remains constant in almost every studio out there. Being a producer ultimately means being a manager. But what does that mean? It's a question you have to be able to answer if you want to be one, but I often see aspiring producers struggle answering it. Being a manager doesn't mean being a boss. Being a manager means being a facilitator. As a producer, it is your job to make sure that as many people on your team are as effective as possible at all times. This can mean anything from helping people communicate more easily to picking up takeout when people are working late. As a producer, you have a little bit of a higher level view of the project than most of the developers, so it's your responsibility to help smooth over the parts of production that the folks in the trenches might not even see. For example, fairly early on in his career, James was thrown into a production role on a project. There was a hiccup in the art pipeline, which was forcing the art team to routinely do a workaround, which wasted maybe 10 minutes of their time each day. It didn't seem like that big a deal, and everyone in the art team assumed it would take forever for the programmers to fix, so they didn't really want to bug him about it. But when you add it up, 10 minutes a day per person meant roughly 3 man-hours a day for this team, completely lost because of this pipeline problem. That adds up over time. So once James got a first-hand look at the crazy workaround the artists had to use just to do their job, he walked over to the programming section of the office and grabbed the nearest available programmer who was waiting for his code to compile. James described the problem and asked, how long would this take to fix? Turns out, almost no time at all. It took 4 lines of code and done. The guy had the problem isolated before his compiling job was even finished. James mentioned it to the programming lead, and the fix was implemented by the next day. Just like that, the art team was better able to do their job. But being a facilitator is actually the easiest part of a producer's job. To be a good producer requires a level of psychological discipline, firmness of spirit, and evenness of temper that comes naturally to very few people. Production, like anything else, is a discipline that you have to work at. The first thing a good producer must come to terms with is the limitations of their own abilities. As a producer, you're going to be the expert when
What
it comes
time
to
is it
scheduling,
actually?
but
I
that's
kind
about
of.
it. Art,
Oh.
program.
Man, it's like 3 a.m. Wasting lots of time working. Made like some nice progress. Starting point. Not too much. I kind of waste a lot more time like on my animation stuff, but it's a good thing. I kind of got my mojo back. Quite like the things I did so far. Whew. Alright. Anyway, I'm gonna take my break. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. And as always, stay healthy, safe. Till next time, stay tuned. The next stream. Yeah. Surprises a lot of people. And again. Bye.